Here we go. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Dave Emmons, and this is The Strange Reality. And my guest usually talk about strange reality things, but my guest today he's a little bit more on the serious side. He's got a sci-fi book that's out, and he's had a meritorious duty, 28 years in military service, and his name is Christopher Loric, and he's very interesting and for his military service. But there's things, of course, I know that some people we can't talk about, and him and I both have had the top secret rating, but mine was years ago, and they probably forgot about me, and maybe they didn't. We did talk about that, but. He's a former U.S. Marine of 28 years, Christopher Loric. His characters are based on real life military. This is SESG Explorer book that he wrote. Scientific and diplomatic persons that he assignment concluded at the onset of the COVID pandemic. I guess that was interesting in the service too. Having served NATO at the headquarters of the Supreme Allied Command Transformation, he was awarded, honored, and recognized by the government for his years of hard work, including, I'm going to read them off real quick because I'm also a vet, and he's a vet, and I admire the work that he's done. He stayed a little longer than me, so I have to give him kudos for that. He got the Defense Meritorious Service Medal, 2 awards, Navy and Marine Corps Commendation Medal, Navy Unit Commendation Award, Navy Meritorious Unit Command Commendation Award, Fleet Marine Force Ribbon, National Defense Service Ribbon, Armed Forces Expeditionary Medal, Iraqi Campaign Medal with EGA Bronze Star Global War on Terrorism Service Medal. That's a long one there. Korean Defense Service Medal, Humanitarian Service Medal, Overseas Service Medal, Marine Corps Rifle Ribbon with E. And he earned a BBA in finance and an MBA from the University of Oklahoma. He received his master's in foreign affairs from Naval War College. So this guy knows quite a bit about the military. He's also went to school for it. Born and raised in Oklahoma, that means he's tough. And he also has had a brief stints in Long Beach, California, and Daytona Beach, Florida. His military service took him to Japan, South Korea, Iraq, Guam, and Germany, as well as Virginia, Rhode Island, Nebraska, Minnesota, Washington, and California. He brings an international and military perspective to his writings, and he resides in Jellicoe, Tennessee. He looks forward to the day that man settles on Mars and expands to the rest of the solar system. And that's what brought him to the interest of writing SESG Explorer. It's on Kindle and Amazon, and we'll be talking about that. And Christopher, I'll tell you, it sounds great. Your military background, we just talked about that pre-show. Christopher Loric, you have anything to add to that or anything new that's going on in your thoughts?
Yeah, I apologize. Your my publicist sent out a incorrect press kit, and I was hoping you would have got the corrected one. I'm a Navy officer for 28 years, and I earned the Navy Expert and Navy Pistol medals. Marine Corps has badges, not ribbons. And the Global War on Terrorism is a separate medal from the Campaign Iraq medal that I received. I was assigned to the Marine Corps twice in my career. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where the publicist got the information wrong, was calling me a Marine vice Navy.
That's what's on my copy. That's what I read.
I understand. And I've already talked to the publicist about it. You were supposed to have the corrected one. It's our mistake that went out. But everything else is spot on with that. Just want to clarify, no, I'm not a Marine. I'm a naval officer. Yeah. I was assigned to the Marine Corps twice. Had very good experiences with them. And when I originally wrote SESG Explorer, I really wanted to highlight the Navy Marine Corps team in a deployed setting. That's really, they have to work closely and well with each other to accomplish their missions. If either the Navy side or the Marine Corps side mess up, you get a lot of dead Marines and sailors. Mm-hmm. it's why in the book, I really tried to highlight their professional relation and their combat skills and combat orientation. Um,
Right.
I did have to adjust the book for Space Force because I wrote it when I was deployed to Iraq with the Marines in 2006. Uh, and it was very Navy and Marine Corps centric. But when I retired, Space Force had been created and I hadn't published it. So I had to revamp the whole book. And I brought in the Air Force as well
Mm-hmm.
in order to give the Navy and Air Force flavor and not just Navy Marine Corps flavor.
Right. Well, there was a little deal in here. It says he received his master's in foreign affairs from the Naval War College. So that kind of
Right.
that's centralizes your experience. I you wrote a lot of your book in Iraq. Now, a lot of times writers have to find a dark corner and be quiet and everything. How did you manage to write under that duress of combat, Christopher?
Well, outside of going outside of the wire in some convoys to do my Iraqi engagement, because I was part of the assignment to help rebuild the Iraqi military in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
But outside of that, I'm what was affectionately, to put it that way, called a fobbit. I was actually on the Fallujah Marine Corps base, or the Marine base in Fallujah. And a lot of my work was in support of the Marines and the Marine and Army teams that was rebuilding the Iraqi military and the Iraqi border security. So when I would go to my hooch at night, uh, it was either go right to sleep, which was kind of difficult to do at times,
Right.
or it was read or write on the book. And I spent a lot of time writing on the book. I spent almost 365 days in Iraq from February of 2006 to February of 2007. And so in that time, that's why the EGA, the Iraqi Campaign Medal,
Mm-hmm.
has the EGA, which is the Marine Corps Eagle, Globe, and Anchor. And the Bronze Star denotes 2 back-to-back tours in Iraq. Uh, I was part of headquarters, so I was designated for 1 year. But the way they did the counting is 2 tours in Iraq.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, during that time, that's when I could find the quietness to sit there on my personal laptop and bang out most of SESG Explorer.
I want to, Christopher, I want to know after all your years of service, mostly with the Navy, 28 years, and you told me some things pre-show. I usually like talking to my guests and getting a feel of what they want to talk about, what they don't want to talk about. But I've learned some things from you just a while ago, a couple of little things. I'm not going to mention those on air, but interesting, very interesting. But I want to know, Christopher, why did you write this book and what was your intent and targeted, I guess, reason for writing this book?
Uh, so I've always liked telling stories, and I actually started writing a book back in my college days. I haven't finished that, but when I joined the military and my experience with 7th Fleet out in the out of Japan, that's where 7th Fleet's housed, because we're still at war with North Korea. It's just a big ceasefire and
Right.
armistice. So yeah, 7th Air Force out there, 7th Fleet. And then before that assignment, I was with the Marines, the 15th MEU in 97. And then again with 1st Marine Division and deployed to Iraq in 2006. I just really wanted to highlight the Navy and Marine Corps team and how they work together and really highlight the Navy. But I didn't want to do it here on Earth, especially when you can stumble into international affairs a little too much.
Right.
I wanted to do it in a sci-fi or futuristic space exploration. But I changed that story the more I started working in joint environments with the other services and at unified commands like U.S. Africa Command, U.S. Strategic Command. I started working with civilian agencies, State Department, National Geospatial, and that's where I started to pull in the diplomat more and the scientist more into the novel. But I just wanted to tell a story to a lot of different people. One, to get them interested in the military, understand a little bit more about the military, and get a sense of public service, be a diplomat, science, or the military. Uh, that's really, in a big nutshell, my intentions.
Okay. Now, you were a commander, and that's equivalent to a colonel. Is that a light colonel or a full bird colonel?
A lieutenant colonel, light colonel.
Okay. All right. That's so you were in the higher echelon, and I guess you know quite a bit. I've heard quite a bit. There's some things you can't talk about. Are there things that you can talk about, Christopher, that you know of that I'm trying to find the seeds that planted this thing about this book and about the futuristic plans, in space and things of that nature, of how you got to that. And did you learn things that helped you write this book and that you can talk about, Christopher?
What I learned about the military and uh, our what we call the interagency group. It comes from my planning and operations background with the unified commands like U.S. Africa Command, U.S. Strategic Command. I avoid anything that's actually classified that I did encounter, but I use a lot of the uh, planning process, the military planning process in the book, though you don't see it broken down that way. It's anecdotal. For instance, the operations officer in SESG Explorer, Captain Lindsay, uh, she is briefing Admiral Brannigan, the main character, and the deputy commander, Major General Connington, on the first encounter with the space station and how they were going to go through all that. And they stop her and use basically General Eisenhower's statement: planning's good, but planning for planning's sake isn't good.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Uh, because you need to know the process, but don't fall in love with your plan. It won't survive when you encounter your enemy.
Yeah, you have to have option A, B, and C a lot of times. And a lot of people, even my wife asked me, so why do you have to mention option B or C? I said, well, you got to be ready, and I said, I'm military. And she said, that's kind of pessimistic, isn't it? I said, no, in the military, that was optimistic because you have to plan for everything.
Yeah,
Yeah.
including success.
Yeah.
On one of the it's not explicit in SESG Explorer, but it is implied. What if you have success? What do you do next? What do you do with that?
Mm-hmm.
One of my gripes about government today is when the Ronald Reagan administration and the Associated House of Representatives and Senate, when we won and beat the Soviet Union, where was the plan for the rest of the world? What happens next?
Mm-hmm.
They were so focused on defeating the Soviet Union, they kind of had an idea of what they wanted, and that's where you saw the uh, DTRA, Defense Threat Reduction Act, an
Right.
agency, come into play. But they didn't really have any solid plan for the world. And we now kind of have a mess of things.
Yeah, we do have a mess. Yes. I want to ask you, I saw in your book, I guess, synopsis, and also I saw two words like Kona blue And could you explain SESG and what that means? Both of those words, or one is the the four letters SESG Explorer. Could you tell us what that is?
So SESG is Space Expeditionary Strike Group. And space is just added because this is in deep space.
Mm-hmm.
But ESG actually comes from the Navy. Uh, Before 2000, we only had what's called ARG-MUs, Amphibious Readiness Groups, which is a 3-ship landing type ship. And then the Marine Expeditionary Unit, the 2,300 or so Marines that go on those 3 ships with the Navy to get them somewhere.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Then we came up with Expeditionary Strike Group, and that's adding destroyers and cruisers plus a submarine to the ARG. So they have naval fire support when they're making the landings. Plus, they can engage with other ships at sea, not the big, deep enemy ships, but more littoral ships where you're closer to the shore, somewhat anti-piracy, so to speak. And that mirrors the carrier strike group, which we now have, where you have the carrier with all of its escort ships plus its strike capability. So because this has really a Marine Expeditionary Unit on board these 5 ships, plus the escort ships, it's a combination carrier strike group / expeditionary strike group. So
Right.
space, because they're in deep space on an exploration.
Okay. All right. That's good. And Kona Blue, what does that mean?
Kona Blue.
Yeah, that's also in your book synopsis. It was mentioned in there, and it was mentioned in the notes. So let me find where that was mentioned at, and I wrote it down. It was mentioned, I think, in the Kindle edition, something it was Kona Blue. And does that word or that meaning come to you about Kona Blue?
Not Kona Blue. I'm sorry. I'm
Okay.
not a.
Let me find out where I saw that. I'll look that up while you're talking, but let's talk about, I'll come back to that because I'm
Yes,
I'm
please
going to
do.
find, yes, I will. Could you tell us, you were talking about the insights on leadership and inner functioning. Now, when it comes to disclosure and deep space, how does the leadership look at that? How do they look at things that could be a conspiracy, and how do they prove them out? And do they have investigations there? If you can talk about that, do they have investigations ongoing about disclosure, Commander Christopher?
Well, my particular jobs, I mean, U.S. Strategic Command is probably the closest that I would got to that type of exploration to deep space. But
Mm,
we mainly monitor the satellites in upper atmosphere, and we monitor the sun and any solar activities that would interfere with the satellites. Before I got to U.S. Strategic Command, they actually did the very important and very press sponsored event of shooting down satellite. They used a Navy ship and targeted one of our satellites. And when it was at the right point in orbit, it was a decaying orbit, they actually shot it down and brought the satellite down in a controlled manner.
right.
China tried to do the same thing, but they really messed it up and caused a lot of debris to fall in an uncontrolled manner. Uh, so that's the closest I ever got to anything about deep space exploration or any contact with uh, life forms other than our own. Uh, my sci-fi background actually comes from reading the books from 1950s and Isaac Asimov, Robert A. Heinlein. That awoke my imagination
Mhm.
about deep space and alien life forms.
Right.
Uh,
I just looked up Kona Blue for you. It was actually listed. It was actually listed on the Google Drop, where you have the different pages. It had Kona Blue and then it had the title of your book. And here's what
oh,
Kona Blue is. It's a top secret government program to investigate, report explains, was allegedly a top secret program to investigate human consciousness anomalies, retrieve and exploit. To investigate human consciousness anomalies. That was listed on the Google drop down pages, and that's how I got that word. It had that word and it had a title of your book right next to it.
Intro. Kona being Kona.
Yeah, it's Kona Blue. Yes.
Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. Did you find it on the Google drop down? Yeah, with your
uh,
title of your book. I didn't see it on the synopsis, but I did see it on the Google drop down, and that's why I wrote Kona Blue to research your synopsis. This is kind of weird, ladies and gentlemen. We're researching something that the author of the book, I just brought it up, but yeah, that's funny how that word got into that Google drop down, and that's where I found the pages on for your book.
yeah, I'm just looking at I have a iPad here, so I'm looking at Kona Blue, uh, and it shows the picture that comes up is the Pentagon, one of the press generals talking to the press.
Yeah.
Yeah, and of course they say this does not exist, but no, SESG Explorer is not associated with this. The only reason, and I'm speculating, why it would get linked to it is uh, the admiral and his fleet do encounter aliens throughout the book.
Okay. Well, here's another drop down for the audience out there. You can look this up. It was actually on Amazon Music, episode 174, Kona Blue and SESG Explorer with Christopher Loric. Kona Blue and SESG Explorer with Christopher Loric YouTube. So yeah, so that's how I got it. So I just thought, I said, am I crazy? Did I see something there, and or was something planted and I didn't know about? But no, it is mentioned throughout Google, and it has ties to your book.
Wow. This,
Yeah. Did you notice? Have you seen it yet? Yeah.
no, actually, I just pulled it up, and after we're done, I'll go and look at this. This is interesting to me.
Yeah, I will actually, I will actually take a picture, a snapshot of this and send it to you. You know, whenever you get a little
And
time,
wonder.
I'll send that to you. Uh yeah, we're looking things up here as we come across, because strange things do happen, especially on the air, and we're researching this whole thing. Uh yeah, so
I, I wonder if it's no interesting. Anyway,
yeah, it is interesting. It's uh, something that I just found, and I just thought maybe that was part of the whole book, or it had some kind of a meaning, and that's why I asked the authors, what do they mean by this word or that word, and so yeah, I will.
well, I find it interesting that somehow or another it got related to a supposed top secret program that the Pentagon says does not exist.
Yeah. I just sent you a picture of that, and we'll talk about that maybe later. But yeah, I'll just send you a picture of the thing. I sent you the website, but I'll send you something else blue with this Kona Blue. It's interesting. I want to find out what that's all about, why they attach that, and I will uh Let's see.
I'm just kind of wondering if it's a Amazon linking or if, oh, okay, I see it. Uh, this comes off of my first interview with UFO No.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah, I sent you
So,
a page on the listings where I got it from. So yeah.
right. So, no, I did an interview. Uh, hang on. I'll tell you when I did it.
I thought maybe that might have been a code name for some of the projects or something.
No, March 15th, I did a taped interview uh, with UFO No,
Mm-hmm.
and it's now posted. So I see down in here a sub item that says UFO No, March 18, 2024. Uh, I guess within the, he uses Kona Blue as part of his podcast.
Right.
So this is off of the interview I did
uh,
on March 15th.
it's a
That
military
released on March
investigation.
18th.
Yeah, it's a military investigation of consciousness, and we all talk about consciousness. I have a lot of friends who get into that, and it deals with communicating with extraterrestrials through consciousness and through meditating, that type of thing. So that's what that's all about. But I don't know how that got tied to your book.
No,
I brought up a strange thing here, I guess.
well, we did discuss about encounterings. We were talking about like the man who stares at goats,
Yes, yes,
that program, and we discussed briefly. Uh, I call it interdimensional travel or interdimensional entities,
right,
such as angels and demonic spirits.
right, yeah,
So
yeah.
we discussed that briefly.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, it's a kind of funny how sometimes during an interview, I had another scientist here a while back that I mentioned something about, and these are conspiracies that I talk about, and I say, well, this is conspiracy, but I heard this was real, and I don't want to talk about the project because I don't want to connect it to the scientists who work with it. Later on, that scientist called me back. He said, Dave, he said, yeah, he said that's real, and I said, okay, so I don't want to mention names or topics tonight. That's why I brought this up with Kona Blue to find out if that's a top secret. Well, if it's top secret, you probably wouldn't be able to talk about it, but it's on the internet, so I thought maybe I'd let you know that. Yeah.
yeah, yeah, and I see his podcast. Yeah, Ben, he posted it, and it's. I guess he uses Kona Blue in his podcast too. That's
Yeah.
cool. Well,
Okay, can I ask you that question? Since we were talking about insights of leadership into inner functioning, have you ever, Commander Christopher, have you ever worked on the consciousness theory about the communications?
have I? No, I have not worked on that project. Um,
Okay.
a lot of my work was done really with. So U.S. Strategic Command does a lot of nuclear command control. So I had to support what that meant. And I dealt with a bio response, as in if there was a release of a bioagent by a foreign adversary or a terrorist adversary, how would we respond to that? So that was my work there. And at U.S. Africa Command, a lot of my work dealt with what was going on the Africa continent and how to support our forces there.
Right,
So that was my operational background, my planning background with that.
right,
Uh, when I was stationed in Korea, naturally everything I worked on was focused on what happens if our ceasefire stops being a ceasefire, we go hot, and how do we deal with that? And I had to look at their nuclear, biological, and chemical uh, potential and how to counter that. Um, so really, everything in SESG Explorer are creatures that I make up, and um, come to find out, uh, what I did just working through the book and looking at what alien life forms, um, a Dr. Frank Drake made an assumption that life forms would take a very similar tack to what human evolution has taken.
Right.
Because as I talked about the book, uh, to me, we mirror aliens to ourselves. Either we're benevolent, we're hostile, or we're something kind of in between.
Right.
And I explore that in this trilogy about how do aliens interact with each other and with us.
Yeah. What did you? I know you mentioned something in your book. You said that a man settles on Mars and expands to the rest of the solar system. You're thinking that we're going to go to Mars soon, Commander Christopher. I heard we're already there. Is that Space Force connection? I don't know. Are these all conspiracy? I know you can't talk outside of your circle of top secret, but I don't want you to because my screen has been flickering. So
Well, I my per what I see and what I take as I'm disappointed that we're not well that we do not have a lunar base, nor do we have a base on Mars. And when I say a base on Mars, I mean more of a scientific presence there.
right,
Uh, we have devices on Mars. And I think when President Trump convinced Congress to create Space Force, which they did, by the way, on the cheap, I'm very disappointed with Space Force in its current configuration. I think President Trump was looking at, we're going back to space and we need to be militarily ready for that.
right,
But we're not. I mean, we're just now through civilian corporations starting to reach back out to the moon. I think Arthur C. Clarke was more correct that if we stayed on track, we would have had a really good satellite as a transit point.
hmm
We would have had a lunar base. And yeah, even by now, if we had continued with more of a fusion exploration for starcraft or spacecraft, I should say, we could have reached Mars by now.
yeah,
I think liquid rocket propulsion is not the way to go.
right. It's going to have to be a plasma, some kind of a plasma energy. But Commander Christopher, this is for entertainment and conspiracy theories only. Okay, I heard the reason why we didn't go back to the moon, and we're going to start going back to the moon, because the extraterrestrials that are there on the moon told our military and our people, NASA, not to go back to the moon. Now, this is just conspiracy for entertainment. And I also heard that there's been a space force out there for some time, and they actually hooked up with a couple of extraterrestrial races, and they fight. They go into, the super soldier thing. You might have heard about that, and they're fighting battles on Mars and things. They have a base on Mars. So there's a lot of conspiracies about that. And I know I don't believe, I'm an ET guy myself, but I don't believe most of that. I don't think, if you knew, you probably couldn't say. But what is your opinion on that? That why we stopped going to the moon so abruptly, and why are they talking about Mars bases and things like that nature and conspiracies, Commander Christopher?
Let's see. So I'll give you two different answers.
Okay.
Because one answer goes, I actually have a story in my mind that it's taking a back seat to uh, SESG Explorer, Minerva, and the last book in the trilogy, uh, which I'll be updating my website, christopherloric.com, with items along those. But all right, what I subscribe to is we stopped exploring space and trying to get to uh, 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 the moon and a permanent settlement is primarily because of what was going on in our own world. As you know, we had in the 70s Vietnam going
Right.
on. We had the Soviet Union really careening for world domination. Then we had the OPEC crisis occurring, and people in the United States after the 1950s and the successes of the 1960s just got tired of hearing about, oh, another Apollo mission, oh, another new. They started getting concerned about what's going on here with our international relations and our economy. How do I survive? And we really got under the threat of nuclear warfare. And I mean, I remember growing up watching a film in my sixth or seventh grade about a 10 megaton bomb landing in a city. And what do we do? And outside of the people that were just disintegrated at the impact point, they did concentric circles for simplicity. But the one circle where people were surviving, but they were just going to die anyway, the doctors went through with a Colt 45 and put a round through their brain.
Wow.
They just mercy killed because there was nothing left to do for them. And that was based off of, if it's true, and I think it is, where the scientists working on the Manhattan Project, a small group of them had an accidental release of fission material, and they quickly figured out who within a certain radius were exposed. And within a matter of days, they died from organ failure because radiation is so potent. That, I think, superseded everything else.
Mm-hmm.
Now, on the other one, I'll give you the other answer.
Yeah.
If President Eisenhower really did meet with extraterrestrials and signed a treaty, that would change a lot of things we would be doing, even after we got to the moon, walked on the moon. Is one of my stories, our solar system has aliens in secret bases that we stumble across as we start to explore and reach out in our own system. And now it becomes, is this our solar system? Are we hosting you? Are you an invader? Are you going to try and keep us to our planet? What do we do next? How do we deal with this? And one of the things I talked about in SESG Explorer is limited technology. I don't use super high tech. I use, since this is really in about 20 years from now, I use technology of what we can attain today, lasers, and lasers have to lock on and generate into a heat pattern. It's not just a single bolt of blaster fire that blows a hole into an enemy ship. You know,
Yeah.
we actually have to work through the correct angle of a ship onto another ship to make contact with the energy beam and maintain that energy beam.
Yeah. I
Uh,
heard they've been doing quite well with their practice runs with the lasers and that type of thing, and the direct energy weapon. They have that too.
yeah,
There's a lot of things that they don't tell us. They're about 50 years ahead of us. Usually, the military industrial complex and the underground scientific community. That's just for entertainment purposes. I mention that every once in a while. It's not proven fact. It's not a proven fact, but also that moon landing. Getting back to that, they say there's a lot of conspiracy out there that they didn't actually land on the moon. It was all staged in a studio. And I get so sick of hearing that because I think it's disinformation, misinformation. I don't know what they're getting at by doing this and trying to perpetuate this lie that we never did land on the moon. Uh, what's your thoughts on that? This is another entertainment part of the show.
well, I mean, personally, I really think we did land on the moon. We planted a flag. And I know I've seen recently some videos trying to analyze why the flag is planted here on Earth in a studio and not on the moon. We have a natural distrust of our government.
Yes.
And it was built into our Constitution that we should distrust the federal government. It's why the three branches, legislative, executive, and judicial branches, co-equal, and they're actually supposed to have a hostile relation towards each other in order to limit our government. And that comes really out of how controlling the United Kingdom government was in the 1700s. Our founding fathers trace it back to the Civil War of the 1600s in the United Kingdom between the Parliament and royals, Protestant versus Catholic.
Right.
And it's why our First Amendment was written, was to limit our government. So people will take a natural distrust of the official government word. And that's okay. That's why we have the First Amendment. It's something that I can see. Show me real evidence, not half of the evidence or your evidence. Show me the evidence. You know, what's the Missouri saying? Show me.
Show
I
me.
don't believe you until
Yeah.
you show me.
I'm right next to Missouri, so I know all about that. Commander Christopher, this thing that they talk about the moon and all this other stuff and not going back there, and because the ETs ran them off, and that's entertainment purposes. I don't want my internet to, carriers to say, okay, that's not community standards. Well, it's just for entertainment. We brought up Space Force a while ago, and why do you think it was such a need? I know it's a satellite battle. That's what we're being told. But from what I heard, it's more than that. It's kind of like deep space battlement and bases like on Moon and Mars, as I mentioned earlier. But you talked about Space Force, and there's been a change of command a couple of times in Space Force. Could you tell us why there's such a confusion there in change of command, and why Space Force was actually brought forward, Commander Christopher?
Well, I haven't heard of any scandals for the change of commands. I mean, and my main character is brought on due to a scandal from a previous commander. That's based off of real events within the military. We've had those type of issues, and commanders get relieved. I haven't, like I said, heard of a issue because of relief. Now, generally, a commander is only in that post for 2 years, maybe even just a year, and then they're promoted to something else. So I would see that without knowing any facts or anything to the contrary, that the commander is just a progression and following the norm. I think when I was hearing and listening to Space Force being created, the intention was to ensure the U.S. military had a military capability in near space. That is between us and our moon, and to be able to counter any other nation's military. And right now, I say it's done on the cheap. Our military structure was created in 1947, our current military structure, with hodgepodge corrections without any real national security or national strategic thought to it.
That's
So
the same year
space,
of Roswell, wasn't it? Yeah.
well, I would say our structure was based off of after World War II, we now have a different concept of the military, which is what happened during the Spanish American War. that was a restructuring of the military because the U.S. Army never left the continental U.S. They were border forts and cavalry fighting the Native Americans.
Yeah.
And now suddenly we're sending a force overseas to Cuba. That changed the entire logistics of the U.S. Army. So the U.S. Army went through a transformation. We haven't done a true transformation since 1947. And Space Force is stuck underneath the U.S. Air Force. Because nobody, who would want this thing called Space Force? And really, what is it? And yeah, when I've listened to a testimony by the commander of Space Force, he was looking at, and this was open reporting. I mean, it was a public hearing by, I think, the House of Representatives. He was talking about the technology that China and Russia is trying to develop to knock our satellites out.
Right.
And how we have to counter that. Okay, well, recently, within the last month, Russia and China have made a joint announcement. They will have a nuclear power plant on our moon by 2035. Well, that violates international treaty about nuclear systems in space. And they talk, well, it's not weaponized, it's a power plant. Okay, how are you going to get there? What claims are you going to make? Basically, our conflict over the Philippine Sea and the Black Sea is now going to go and become a conflict over the moon.
Yeah, that's they're taking it out there, and we heard rumors that they had satellite destroyers that were nuclear. That Putin said no, we're not ready for that yet. Who's telling the truth? I mean, I always said Putin would be a good card player because he calls a good bluff. So, so Commander Christopher, what do you think about that? Are they close to having a satellite killer, like a nuclear satellite killer?
It's Well, remember, the only other, well, we have nuclear powers around the world, but the Soviet Union and the United States were the only real nuclear powers. Yes, the UK has nukes, France had nukes,
Right.
Israel, we know that. But the two real powers that could reach out into space or put anything in orbit to reach down were those two countries. So when we defeated the Soviet Union and the Russian Federation came about, what happened to any satellites that Khrushchev may have put up? And Brezhnev, those two were very interested in satellites around the Earth. So I speculate, because I really don't know, is there any satellites around that has a nuclear capability? What I can say is there are international treaties saying there will not be. And DITRA was created, Defense Threat Reduction Agency, to monitor and keep that from happening. And we started dismantling a lot of the Soviets, or now Russians, nuclear capabilities. Well, all that has stopped. We have two treaties saying we will reduce the number of nuclear missiles and bombs. And a lot of our generals support that. Well, China is now building that capability.
Yes.
Russia is probably rebuilding it.
Mm-hmm.
We're going back to the 1970s foreign diplomacy and foreign policies of a mutually assured destruction.
That's what I was going
Now
to say. Yeah.
we're doing a new space race to the moon, and how real that is or not depends on the economies of China and Russia. And yeah, I don't get into it into my book. I look at it from a national security standpoint, being that I am retired military. I am concerned that our military is not properly structured for the threats of the future. I think Space Force should not be a service. It should replace probably U.S. Strategic Command as a combatant commander,
Mm-hmm.
and that the other services provide forces to them, because uh, U.S. Air Force tactics of air power today is not what it was back from World War II and General LeMay's day. They're totally different. The Navy is more suited for uh, an actual ship in space,
Mm-hmm.
because what we do on the surface of the water, under the surface of the water, and with our own air power. Now I act like I'm Navy. I'm retired, but
Retired Navy. Yes. Yes. Yeah. Okay.
but we can use those same principles for ships in space. You know, um,
Let me read off
US
something, a
review.
synopsis, get you back on. I want to know more about your book and your thoughts that is coming out of this book. Loric's science fiction novel plays out like a military-minded Star Trek movie, and everybody likes Star Trek, but is in its extended version format. The author writing is easy to follow and doesn't delve into deeply technical parts of space travel and combat. So you're talking about in this book, you're talking about space travel and combat, and you said that you wrote it in a sense of the combat technology that we have now and not what might be futuristic. Is that right, Commander Christopher?
Right, right. Yeah, you just read off of the US Review of Books
Right.
that did a
Mhm.
review of the book,
Right.
and thank you for doing that. Yeah, again, I didn't want a quick solution such as, well, Star Trek has phasers and photon torpedoes. We have laser technology, or what we call directed energy weapons, which uh, isn't just a laser. We're looking at sound, and we're looking at perhaps a form of electromagnetic pulse, which we saw from nuclear weapons,
Right.
what that is,
Hmm.
and how it knocks out systems. So, what DARPA can develop today with industry is the technology in SESG Explorer. It's not so far into the future that you have a Star Trek like battle. Uh, and I'm trying to think of the name of the Next Generation episode where the Enterprise meets another force, and within seconds they wipe out the entire force because of the technology difference.
Right.
It's so great. But here, my aliens and the human forces are near peer competitors, which would be like Russia, China versus us today. Those are near peer competitors. So um, the admiral has to organize his fleet for each battle and what to do if he's going to engage an enemy. How do they do interlocking fires like a carrier strike group does today, or a bomber squadron during World War II had to do?
You know.
They had to really get tight and have interlocking fires. Or can they disperse? If we're in a naval battle, you may need to disperse your forces. And you take a Marine unit, they may disperse in order to get that interlocking fire or avoid massive casualties from an enemy strike.
From
So,
what I've seen, I'm an experiencer. I've seen this technology come through wormholes, these UFOs, UAPs, whatever. I've seen them come through wormholes, and they have technology far in advance of us. So if we met them on the battlefield now, we wouldn't stand a chance. It looks like from all indications of all experiencers and all even the military is starting to disclose some of their video of these UAPs and how they travel and their technology. If we would have happened to lock horns with them, I think we would lose right now. Is that what you're thinking, Commander Christopher?
So I have three general scenarios that I use with aliens. And one of they all deal with them having superior technology.
Right.
All right. And the US military, we operate off of a premise that we always face a superior force. And in doing that, we come up with innovative solutions to beating our enemy. And if you always take the stance that you'll always have superior technology or superior firepower, you degrade your brain. You don't use your mind. And I think the human race, we are innovative, we are creative, and we can solve problems. We don't need a external force giving us the answer. I believe we can devise the solution and beat a technically superior force.
Right. Well,
If
President Reagan's speech back in 1988, I think it was, he said, he was telling, I guess, the UN, he said, what if an outside force come and attack all of us? Did he know something when he said that? And he was meaning an extraterrestrial force that would attack all of us. We would all combine as friends. We would quit worrying about being enemies, and we join together as allies to fight this external force. So he knew something, and now Trump says, he says we got weapons, and he told North Korea this, Kim Jong Un. He told him, he said, we got weapons. He said, you would only dream about. So what is, we are advanced, and we don't really know everything we have because that's kept like top secret or even cryptic secret, I guess, Area 51 in those places. But we have jets, we have weapons, we have lasers, we have things that I think what Trump was talking about that he saw was eye opening. I mean, he really saw this, and that's why I think he created the Space Force and wanted them to implement a lot of these weapons. I guess I don't. You may not know about that because you're compartmentalized, Commander Christopher. But what's your thoughts on that?
so, when it comes to our technology, um, I'm not really going to touch that
Yeah,
because
okay. I knew that was
that that
lying. I
that
just
falls into the I can neither confirm nor deny
right.
category.
Hmm.
But I can talk more to the politics
Okay.
and to brinkmanship of diplomacy.
Okay.
Uh, when you take a president who makes a statement, oh, all right, I'll compare our current president to our last president. Last president looks at Kim Jong Un and says, dude, you don't even know what I have, and I can take you out in a heartbeat.
Right.
And he looks at him and he is cavalier, and yet he's confident and he's unpredictable. Now, Kim Jong Un, who's used to all this predictable leadership and a policy of dealing with North Korea, suddenly goes, oh, whoa, this guy can do something, and I don't know what he has or is capable of. Maybe I better start listening and behaving differently.
Hmm.
Now you take your current president, and Russia's saying, I'm upset at NATO, and you guys are getting too close. And Ukraine has Russian speaking people that want to be Russian. And you have a president go, well, if you take a little bit, we may not do anything.
Yeah.
And now, bam, you have a total invasion of Ukraine
Right.
because you have a president that says, well, there's a squishy point here. We can talk about it. He's predictable. And Putin even said, I like Biden. He's predictable.
Yes, he really likes him. Yeah, he because he's winning all of his bluffs, that he calls. Uh, you were saying politics. You have politics in your book, SESG Explorer book. And do you discuss how deeply do you discuss politics in that book, Commander Christopher?
So I touch on human politics and US politics. just personal relation
Mhm.
and character politics. For instance, the diplomat, Michael Shea, he's not liked by his department, the State Department, because he doesn't follow the norm of the organization. He's an outside character from the normal State Department entities. So he's stuck in a African country as a diplomat. And not even the president, I state this in the book, the president doesn't want the State Department to know about this mission. They use Mars as a cover up from how they are building this fleet. Everybody thinks what's going on is a trip to Mars. And so they give Michael Shea as a diplomat because the State Department only says, well, the military wants somebody, so we'll give him O'Shea, which suits Brannigan because O'Shea is similar to him. He's a bit of a rogue. He doesn't always play ball.
Yes. Now, you being a commander, you might have met a lot of the top echelon. Have you ever been to the White House and visited the president, Commander Christopher?
No,
Mm.
no. I had, when I was a kid, I went to the White House on a White House tour.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
I did support President Obama's mission to Kenya when I was at US AFRICOM, and I worked with the White House military unit
Right.
in that particular item. I actually received a phone call when at my first assignment from the White House dealing with a particular case. That was interesting. That
Yeah.
was a fun day.
I missed my tour of the White House when Abraham Lincoln was there. That's how
But
I am. I want to get you onto this alien thing, and I know that you mentioned that the war with the aliens and combat and the space travel. You have here how aliens could be slave holding, corrupt, and hostile, similar
yeah,
to early humans in history. Could you explain that, Commander Christopher?
actually, I use that uh, to strike at our current situation. We have a lot of people on our planet still in slavery in the US and outside of the US.
Yes.
Uh, and I don't think our government pays. I think we give lip service more to what happened in pre 1860s, and we use that as a political talking point
Right.
without acknowledging the fact we really have slavery today in our country.
Well,
Uh,
some people
it does,
equate that to high inflation, and a lot of people are living paycheck to paycheck now. That's a form of slavery, isn't it? In a way, I guess, speaking, that's just for entertainment value. I don't want to,
well, no, I mean, um, if you want to say a communist type country or a feudal system, yes, if you have your people working uh, uh, hand to mouth every day, then yes, you're controlling and you're enslaving your population. What I'm talking about is things that I saw, well, reports I see in the United States and stuff I saw in South Korea. Uh, I take that experience and put it into the book for a moral dilemma and legal dilemma, and what can you do about it? Because the crew encounters slavery and they see it. And now, uh, do they go off of their morality and do something, or do they ignore it? Or, you know, they have a mission, and is anti-slavery part of it? Is anti-piracy part of it? So I'm really just bringing up in the book a condition of today. And one of the prime examples I like to talk about is Charles Gordon, a man from the UK, a general from
Mm.
the 1800s. He went into the Sudan and stopped slavery in the 1800s. But again, no foresight. that was the economy of the Sudan. And he wiped out their entire economy, but he had no plan to fill that vacuum. And that led to Egypt being attacked in other countries by what they call the Mahdi. There are many Mahdis, but there's the Mahdi of Sudan. And Charles Gordon had to go back to the Sudan. That's where he met his death in Khartoum.
Mm-hmm.
But we have slavery going on today. I mean, the whole border issue. And
Yeah.
I bring up in SESG Explorer a border issue, and that's slave trafficking. And I don't like the term human trafficking. It's too soft and cushy. I call it what it really is. It's slave trafficking.
I agree with you, Commander Chris. I agree with you 100%. I've heard more and more about the trafficking and how many kids like on the border, something like 65,000, 70,000. Don't hold me to that. That's just for educational or entertainment purposes. And I'm saying that, but they don't, I guess they don't really know, but somebody took an estimation of that. Uh, the other thing about slavery, us people that are in ufology and ETs, and you just get into the ET, but you get into the political parts of it and about the military part of it. But I believe that the ETs enslaved us thousands of years ago, like the Anunnaki, in Samaria. They started this years ago, enslaving us humans to do certain jobs or do certain things that they didn't want to do. So we've come up through this society thousands of years, and what they've told us is probably all wrong. History is not what we think it is. Do you agree with that, Commander Christopher?
Uh, History is complex. I learned more about United States history from my elementary years on. I remember reading history books in elementary school, but I learned more about our history at the Naval War College than I ever really grasped in my high school and even my first university, because the Naval War College uses history to talk about military strategy and political strategy and the interplay of them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I I think we have history. I think we have good history. You bring up the ancient empire. I always have trouble pronouncing the Anunnaki.
Anunnaki, yeah.
Yeah,
Sumerians, yeah.
yeah. I mean, Mesopotamia, we have history. And once we start to learn how to read the ancient writings, the cuneiform, I think it is,
Mm-hmm.
and we get the Gilgamesh epic out of that, uh, which is pretty well. It's written in stone, not a pun. Literally written in stone.
Yeah. Well, they actually found, they think, the tomb of Gilgamesh here
In Iraq. Yeah, uh, that's one of the things I've come across recently. That part of the Iraq War dealt with securing Gilgamesh's tomb and whatever they found there, and
right.
it really went quiet quick.
Yeah,
Uh,
that's a conspiracy. I heard that too. They had a portal that they were using, or they said that they had it there, and that's why they went in. But we hear all kinds of stuff. Our news media is not honest with us, and I think that's what stirs up all these conspiracies. And everybody has second thoughts about this and that. When I hear a story anymore, even on the news, I say, okay, I'm going to scratch my head and sit back and watch this work out. You got people on the internet that say, "Oh, you better be ready. The end of the world is going to happen tomorrow." I say, "Oh my God," and I just click it off. But let's talk about what happens if Earth made contact with aliens, Commander Christopher. What would happen if we made contact with aliens?
well, I'm. Hey, enough. I'm working. Calm down.
Okay.
Uh, One of my dogs is in here wanting attention.
Uh,
Um,
that happens quite a bit on the shows. Yeah, the doggy.
yeah, the other one will speak. This one paws me a lot. the other one speaks to me. They talk in different ways. This
Yeah.
one's more nonverbal. The other one's verbal.
Okay.
Again, it mirrors. Are they hostile? Do they come in ready to try and conquer the planet? Are they benevolent? Uh, I mean, we're a paranoid species, but even a benevolent group comes in. I would ask, why are you wanting to make contact with us? What's your reasoning? You know, are we able to get a satisfactory answer from an intelligent life form making contact? And if they are making contact with us, is the Drake equation, and Dr. Ancelis at the University of Nottingham used it because there's some 30 or more actual intelligent civilizations in our galaxy. If they ever do make contact, or if they are making contact, why are you picking one nation over another? Or are you talking to multiple? And I don't believe they're giving us technology if they are. I think they're trying to teach us mathematics and how to communicate and how to progress ourselves. Because if you hand a loaded handgun to a 5-year-old, you're likely to get shot, or the 5-year-old likely to shoot themselves.
Right. They're handing us
What
a
you
fishing
do,
pole. Yeah, they're handing us a fishing pole and saying, you learn how to fish from here. Yeah,
right?
I can see
I,
that.
but instead, as a responsible gun owner, I'm going to teach the 5-year-old about this tool,
Hmm.
the dangers of it and the goodness of it. But I'm going to walk them through a procedure so when they do pick up a loaded handgun, they use it responsibly.
Yeah.
You know,
I don't know
even
how these kids, the little kids, get a hold of a handgun. A 3-year-old that gets hold of a handgun and shoots somebody accidentally. How do they get? I mean, it's a parental thing. It's parents that are just not paying attention to what they need to do. I guess, Commander.
well, you're hiding it for one thing. And anytime you hide something from a child, they're going to seek it out.
Yeah,
You
right.
know, uh, and it is parental, and it's understanding that you really have to do instructions. I think if the uh, the crop circles and the items we've seen in Peru and Easter Island, if that is from an intelligent alien force, it's trying to communicate to us to teach us how to communicate. But I go back to why. What's the purpose? What's the objective?
Hmm.
Because if we do make contact, we have to figure out the objective.
Right.
Can we think like a truly alien mind? I mean, how would an alien mind really operate? So far, we do what I think we do, what we call in the military. We mirror the aliens, just like we might. It's a trap. It's a bad thing to do.
Right.
If we mirror the enemy, if we hold up a mirror to ourselves and go, that's exactly what the enemy's going to do. We teach a military planning process. That's a trap, and we get defeated. But that's exactly what we're doing with aliens. And I'm not doing anything different in SESG Explorer.
Yeah, I noticed here in this one reading too in the U.S. Review of Books, you got a good review. Once the action starts, sci-fi lovers may easily get lost in the fun, much like summers pass when watching hits like Independence Day. So you have a lot of action in this book. I guess you're talking about battling these ETs, and where do they battle at in the book, Commander Christopher? Is it
Oh,
is it here on
um,
Earth or outside of Earth?
no. So the reason for the expedition is the message was not directed at Earth. They figure it out. It's just a general broadcast message. And the US government, the president and the military decide they will not let the location on Earth be known by any aliens. It's classified at the highest level. And in fact, Admiral Brannigan, the main character, and every commander of the ships understand they are to destroy themselves before they are captured, and the information of where Earth is located is found out by any alien. That is the general order number one. Earth's location is not to be revealed. And
Right.
so the expedition goes out to deep space. And in fact, one of the things I'm doing right now is looking at the Milky Way galaxy, because the third book takes place both on Earth and out in one of the arms of the Milky Way. The second book, which is right now at Department of Defense for the security review, again, takes place on Earth, but in different locations of the Milky Way galaxy. But they go out and the battles occur at a different planet, 2 space stations, and then a running battle from Kammorriga. That's the name of the planet where the senders of the message are at. They take a running battle at that point.
Right.
So it's expansive.
You have battle scenes, I guess, in there. Battle scenes are really hard to write down, aren't they? I mean, I just did a book too, sci-fi, and the battle scenes, you have to really think about them, what kind of weapons they have and their stuff. But it says here that you wrote this book and you actually have characters based on a culmination of real life military, scientific, and diplomatic people that you have encountered over the 28 years of military service. So you actually have a basis for each one of your characters in the book, a real person, except you don't use names or anything else or times, dates, because that's your top secret. Can you explain that to the Commander Christopher?
Well, yeah, Michael Shea, I've worked for an ambassador, and I've worked with a charge d'affaires, worked around an extremely hostile State Department rep. So, and at War College, we had State Department staff and diplomats in the courses with us. And it was interesting to hear their perspective of the military. And I mean, not that we're perfect, because the military, we make mistakes too, not just the State Department.
Right.
And the State Department and the military today, in my estimation, is a hostile relationship. And I don't believe it was always that way in our history. In fact, I think they worked closely together for a large part of our history. It's a recent development. So Michael Shea is based off of different encounters I've had with State Department personnel. The Admiral is definitely based off of several different people, admirals, lower ranking individuals. His personal relationship with his wife is actually based somewhat off of my relationship with my wife, is we spent 10 years apart with my military service.
Oh, that's a tough one. That's a military.
You know, so the Admiral and his wife, they love each other, but most of their marriage has been apart because of service to country. And, you know, there's several people that are in that boat in our military. It's not a unique experience. So I tried to make the characters identifiable to people who, especially if their job takes them away from their spouse. And it's not just the military, you see that. Police, fire. I mean, anytime you're in service, you have that tension of marriage.
Yes.
But, yeah, a lot of the characters are based off of people, and I can't single out a single person and say this is what the character is based off of.
Yeah. I'm going to go back with the military not getting along a lot and having difficulties and stuff. I I have to go back and say just a little disclaimer. Marines and the Army got along good on the field and battlefield, but you get us in a nightclub and get drunk, we don't get along. And the Navy the same way, you know. They say, okay, that's our opponent, we're going to fight him. Or, you know, the Army and Marines have different ways of fighting battles and wars, and the Marines are really gung ho, and they push over the hill with just a few people, and us Army guys will sit back and say, let's let the artillery soften up that target first, you know. But the Marines said, oh no, we're not going to wait, we're going to go, you know. So that's they're gung ho. They're tough. I get that, but that's what happens when you get into a bar scene. You start drinking, and that comes out. But I want to get into the last kind of a question. I know a lot of people are interested in this disclosure. I know we mentioned it pre-show. Uh, how do you feel about that, Commander Christopher, about disclosure, where it's going and what's going to happen?
Well, it's mixed. It's a mixed feeling because for a republic in our country, it's a republic, not democracy. I mean, that's a pet peeve of mine.
Right.
Uh,
Oh,
our founding fathers rejected democracy and said it in favor. Well, they rejected democracy in favor of a republic because democracy is mob rule. 51 voters in a population of 100 get to decide everything. The other 49 have to suck it up.
yeah.
And they wanted the minority to be protected from a mass rule, but they respected democracy or democratic principles. And you find that in our Constitution. It's there's democratic principles throughout the U.S. Constitution,
Hmm.
but we're a republic. Now, in that, there are things that, yes, the government need to keep secret and not reveal. And mainly, and we get a little over the board with this on what is secret, because you do need to defend the republic against enemies, foreign enemies in particular. I mean, domestic enemies is an interesting term. I've always struggled with that, and especially with the oath to defend the U.S. Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic.
Right.
How do you determine a domestic person is really an enemy? That's the hard part. Foreigners, easy. Domestic,
Yeah.
are they? And then disclosure, in order for the republic to work, people have to have enough disclosure to make informed decisions, especially with the representative, more so than the senator,
Mm.
because the representative, that's your only real democratically elected person. Well, senators are thanks to a amendment, but really a smaller group of people say, this person, you're going to represent me at the federal government. And that person has to be more open, maybe even so than senators with the people. But the founding fathers really did not want a huge executive branch. And in fact, they didn't want the legislative branch to have a lot of power. They were only to meet 100 days out of the year and do all their business and then go back and work their farm or their business.
Right.
You know, government business, 100 days. The executive branch wasn't supposed to be as big as it is today. You know, that creates a different dynamic when you have a large executive branch. And I'm more of a limited government person.
Yeah, you're talking about all the agencies underneath the executive branch that they have control of, like of course, the VA is necessary in the educational department, Homeland Security, all this, and some of these agencies just started up in the past 10 years, so they're adding on more and more.
And there are agencies I've never heard of, and they suddenly pop up. It's like, who are they? What are they doing?
Right.
Why do they exist?
So you're thinking this is kind of clouding the disclosure thing with all these different elements coming together.
Well, yeah, I mean, Ronald Reagan, you brought up President Reagan when the Iran-Contra issue came up. You know, you have presidents who tried to hide information. Well, when Congress said, hey, we want to know what's going on, he literally had trucks full of documents just roll up, and he pushed it all out the back end of the truck, said, here you go, Congress, here's all the info, now you figure it out. So he hit them with a deluge of information that rattled them and caused confusion among them.
Right.
them.
I heard that half of the Pentagon and half and the other half of the Pentagon don't want one half doesn't want disclosure, the other half does. And that's where you get into this 50-50 battle like you're talking about. And they, for some reason, they just don't want to really go into disclosure. They actually kind of slowed it down a couple of months ago, and I'm wondering why. They even postponed a meeting that's supposed to have, I think, Senator Rubio was supposed to be part of that meeting and meeting with military people in Florida a couple of months or so ago, and the Pentagon canceled that meeting. They didn't want to meet, so they didn't want to. Yeah, so they're kind of backing off from it. I'm wondering why and who is doing all this, and that's why this disclosure dilemma is getting thicker and thicker, and us people out on the streets, we're talking about it, and we want disclosure. We want the military. They dribbled in a little bit of pictures and videos to us, and it's a kind of a tease, and then all of a sudden they're backing off. And I just wanted to ask you if you knew why, Commander Christopher.
Well, specifically to that question, I don't. I can tell you that the U.S. military and George Washington really started this when he was president. He wanted the U.S. military to be an educated military.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, started with the officers, but after World War II, it spread across all ranks. We are the most educated military force in probably all of history. With that, you get philosophies in the military. I was known as a philosophical type thinker, and I'd never consider myself that, but other people would tell me I'm too philosophical. And I'm a big believer in the Constitution and what it's written. I had a retired lieutenant colonel tell me, you're a constitutionalist. Well, let's see how that works out for you. Well, I'm sworn to defend the Constitution.
Right. Yes.
I need to know what's in it and live by it. And you get a lot of different military personalities who are highly educated, highly motivated, strong beliefs, but those beliefs can be different. Government knows best and will do it right. Just shut up and get out of our way. Others, no, we got to be accountable. You got to refill it. And you get that tension.
Mm-hmm.
And when you get into then the upper levels, the general officers and flag officers, they will get into a form of groupthink and they'll lock into it. What comes to mind is a movie called The Pentagon Wars. They're talking, I believe it's about the Bradley vehicle, how out of Vietnam, they said we need a troop vehicle with just a cannon or a high power weapon on it. And that beast grew into such a thing that it never got produced, and what was getting produced actually could catch on fire and kill people inside. It's a comedy, but it's about a real tragedy in the military procurement system.
Mm-hmm.
And you see that groupthink occur. And if you suddenly see things happening one way or another, you probably got into power positions of power, people of a certain philosophical mindset, and they'll lock into that. And I've seen it where a commander colonel and above. Once they get into a decision, if you can't interrupt that and you don't want the decision that's about to be made, you have to get in there and interrupt it. Otherwise, once it's made, they will not change their mind.
Yeah. So
You
now,
can
yeah,
face them with so much evidence. Once they've hit that decision, it's weakness for them to say, that's a bad decision, let's change it.
yeah,
And
that,
they'll swear up and down that they will always change their mind.
yeah,
Once they've locked it, that's it.
yeah, that tells us a lot about what's going on right now. Uh, Christopher Loric, Commander, would you tell us where we can find you on the internet and also your books? You have a sequel of 3 books. Could you tell us a little bit about that? It's unbelievable that an hour and a half has went by this quick. It does. You know, when the interesting talks, I mean, I love it, but it goes by so fast.
So my website is christopherloric.com, and I put up interviews and events that I'll be going at to sell my books. I also keep the status of where the book may be, i.e. SESG Explorer can be found at Amazon and Barnes & Noble online. I have links to those. Minerva is the second book in the trilogy. And right now it's at Department of Defense. So I'll keep that updated. I'm about finished with the first drafts in publishing.
Mm-hmm.
The third book, I'm keeping the title a little close, but it's a trilogy,
Okay.
and it follows the Admiral Brannigan, the main character, from when he's assigned to SESG Explorer to his final assignment, where he's going forth to do battle, real warfare against the Kammorrigans. Because as the cover, if you can't see it too well, but the
Right.
cover shows around the planet Kammorriga,
Yeah.
a Earth ship being attacked by Kammorrigan warships. It
Okay.
doesn't go well, and we
Uh,
end up in a war situation.
what do these ETs look like, the Kammorrigans?
Uh, they're three-legged, with four limbs coming off their torso. Two of them are tentacles, and two of them are arms with 8 digits for hands.
Yeah.
Somewhat pointed heads. So they're
Yeah.
totally alien.
Yeah, that sounds like it. We've been talking to Commander Christopher Loric and his book SESG Explorer and his sequels of that book. We hope you are interested in looking him up on his website. I'll have his website and the books listed on a narrative when I post the video in a couple of days. And I hope that you get involved in this and learn something about a little bit about disclosure and behind the curtain type of thinking that goes on the group think. So I've been listening to Commander Christopher Loric, and this is Dave Emmons with Strange Reality. Thank you for tuning in and hope you enjoy this show.